Hi, I'm Brett Cenkus. I am a business attorney with a focus on M&A or mergers and acquisitions and an M&A advisor. Today we're talking about LLCs. We're talking about whether or not you should form a member managed or a manager managed LLC. So in an LLC, under most state laws, not every state, but most states, you can elect to be member managed or manager managed. And you can think about the decision like this. Let's start with if you are member managed, the members, there's only one type of what we call governing authority. There's one group that makes all the decisions. They're the members. And those members think of them like they're the officers, the directors, and the shareholders from a corporation, right? In a corporation, you've got these three different distinct, groups or governing authorities. There's officers, shareholders, and directors, and members in an LLC would be all of them. That's it. They make all the decisions, the owners and the managers. Now you can have employees, you can hire presidents and have other titles and things, but from a sort of corporate law or, business law perspective, per the code in your state, that is going to have just one official governing authority, governing body members. Manager managed is going to have a second one. They're going to have managers. And this isn't a manager like someone who punches your shift card, or watches the assembly line or something. This is a sort of a more significant, I don't want to denigrate those roles, but a more significant sort of corporate concept. This is if you have managers in an LLC as well as members. The managers are kind of the officers and the board of directors. They're the equivalent of that in the corporation. So whereas the members would be all three, shareholders, officers, and directors, if you have managers, you split out, and the members are generally the equivalent of shareholders or owners. And then the managers are doing the day-to-day and making the important decisions and acting like a board of directors. So they're a mix of officers and directors. So that's the distinction among, how these things break down and what manager managed means. Now, so how do you choose one versus the other? Okay, very simple, very simple. Our decision is generally made this way. Are we going to have some people in this business who are active making decisions and some people who either are not active, just passive investors, or maybe they're decision makers, but a very different level of decisions, like fewer decisions, So are we going to have people who do most all the day-to-day? I mean, the easy breakdown is if I start a business and I ask you to invest and I'm going to run the business and you're just going to be a passive investor, then in that world, we have clearly two different levels of decision-making. Almost certainly, I'm going to have a lot more authority. Now, there might be some important things that you get to decide on, maybe not, but day-to-day and all the decisions, maybe a lot of them are going to go to me. There's going to be a clear distinction about decision-making. And so that would be a natural case to have a manager-managed LLC, because what is very easy to do when you have the separation legally and under the code and under the state formation documents of manager versus member is to shift decision-making in different directions. It's just very easy and elegant and natural. Doesn't look odd, to that investor. If I come to you, it doesn't look weird. You could accomplish this. You could have a member managed and still do this with non-voting shares. And you could say in your company agreement, Brett makes all the decisions, an investor doesn't make any, but it's really easy to separate out decision-making. And that's what you would do. You would do the same thing probably if you and I and a third person was starting a business and I was still going to be the primary person running it. So if you're going to have some involvement, if I was going to have a whole lot more, there's a whole group of decisions that are going to flow to me, it's just easier to separate them and manager managed. So the question you have to ask yourself is that going to be the case? If it's a sole member LLC and you don't intend to bring on partners or have investors, you would never make a manager managed LLC. It doesn't make any sense. You have two levels of governing authority that you got to talk about in your operating agreement, which doesn't have a lot of significance, but under some state laws, you have to make one and you've got to separate these things out. But there's just one person making the decisions. You also wouldn't do it if you and I are going to be 50-50 owners of a business and we don't intend to bring anyone else in. There's just, again, why would we separate these things? If really under 50-50. What I mean is we're going to make equal decisions, or even 51-49. It's like we're going to make all the decisions together. The vote just, sometimes it might be unanimous and sometimes it might be majority, or, whatever. It's still like every decision is going the same group of people, that you and I. It doesn't make sense to have two levels of decision making. So it really comes down to, do you have a separation in terms of the involvement in decision making in this business among groups of people? If you have outside investors who are going to be passive investors, you're almost certainly going to be manager managed. Almost certainly. And if you don't have outside investors, probably aren't going to be manager managed unless you have, a clear distinction among the founders and partners, whatever, members, in terms of who has, again, it's not who has more vote. It's, are we giving certain vote decisions to one group and not the other? If we've got a delineation there, we're almost certainly going to be manager managed. That's the simple 101 of member versus manager. If you got any questions, if they're general questions, you can drop them down in the questions to this video. Like, subscribe. I appreciate you dropping by today. Thank you.